and the phone drops just as it goes live. That's why what happens on live stays on live. So I always say, you need a therapist, go live. This is the last stretch of my journey. I have less than an hour before I will be at my first location, which is the mission home, to pick up pass along cards. What a blessing. Heather, thank you so much. That just means a lot. This is like, okay, final stretch, less than an hour. My legs feel asleep. I may have to get out and run around the car for 30 seconds, but I am on Route 6 and made it from Grand Junction and Connecticut. And so my message, I was listening to church news. First of all, a shout out to my friends All In podcast in Australia. I pulled over, I was searching for Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints under podcast, under Apple, and I saw my friends at All In. Was so excited because I just think they're doing great missionary service. Him and his wife just returned from being senior missionaries, and he loves sharing the gospel. He follows me on YouTube, always comments on Insta, and I just feel like I know this guy. And anyway, but I was listening to the church news app, and they were talking about the 11 Area 70s that were just sustained at last General Conference. And I couldn't help but feel this, hearing their stories as the whole purpose of the podcast was to get to know them better. I'm going to turn this around so you can see me. The whole purpose of this was to get to know them better. A friend of mine who I know, who is called as an Area 70, again, to a higher Area 70 position, is from New York City. And I didn't meet him at first when I got to hear him speak, because it was during the middle of the pandemic and we had Zoom for our state conference. But he came up from New York City and he said something that I will never forget. And I heard his testimony, and I want to share that with you. He said when he was joking around, but it was serious. He said when I was like, oh my gosh, if he's ever called as the quorum of the 12, Jesus is going to be on earth. And let me explain why. He said when he was called to be a bishop, a week later, September 11th, 9/11 happened. And that was his ward. One of his wards was affected as a bishop. Wow. Okay. Then, a week before, another natural disaster hit New England, affecting New York City and Connecticut and Massachusetts, where I live. Flooding. It was just horrible. A week before this happened, he was called to be the state president. And he said, and then Hurricane Sandy hit New York City. And I was like, okay. And then he goes, in February, I was called to be, the end of February, I was called to be an Area 70 for the Northeast district, which is what part of my district. It goes from DC all the way up to Canada. And he said that he was called to be in Area 70. And he said, and then 2 weeks later, the pandemic hits and the world shuts down. And I'm like going, so that's why I said to myself, if this, my live video was paused because of cell phone connection. I apologize. So what happened was, when I was going through, I think, Pierce Canyon or something, I had no cell phone service for about 15 minutes, which was fabulous. I loved it. Less Wi-Fi, more NeFi. Anyway, I'm going to turn this around. Now, when he said his father never kept him away, his father was just away. So his father brought him with him to general conferences, to talks, and he goes, here, let me introduce you to President Hinckley or or Elder Ballard, or he just would always include his son. Or he said, I will never forget seeing my dad as a child. We're sitting up front, my mom and my dad is conducting state conference. And he's like, but my dad always felt me, or made me feel a part of it. And he said, so this gospel, I need to find other ways to get other people to be a part of this, because it's changed my life. And I got goosebumps. I was like, this is just... So there was a reason I needed to listen to the church news today on the podcast, and it was a show that was recorded 2 days ago, which I am loving. And I had to share that with you because there was another guy that was called in Mexico, and I don't know him or his name, but he was bearing his testimony about growing up in Mexico. Before he served a mission, he had to pray to, and he said even after he was, when he, like a couple weeks into serving a mission, he was still praying to know if the gospel was true, if the Book of Mormon was true. And then he said it was on his mission he witnessed what was said in the Book of Mormon, that, and he goes, Joseph Smith was called of God to restore this gospel on the earth today. So I got really pumped up with that. I wanted to share it. This will probably be the last time that I go live, because I feel like, well, I have only 40 minutes left before I hit the mission home or mission office, or I need to share his gospel. And I know from serving in this calling that I have with the church that that mission home has a budget, and they pay for that stuff. That, you know, the Holy Bibles, I think, are the most expensive. They're almost $5 each. But the Book of Mormons are cheaper because I guess they're lighter. I don't know. But I had to get 50 Bibles. Was it? No, 100 Bibles. And I asked the mission president in Boston and said, this is what I want to do. This was my plan for member outreach program, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I'll split it with you. Barnes and Noble is the Holy Bible. When I found that out, I asked the manager, because that's where I wrote my book, Is He Nuts, was inside Barnes and Noble, sitting in the cafe. I asked her, I said, what if we bring a little display and say free? And inside the cover, the missionaries and I wrote, want to study with the missionaries for free? Call this toll-free number, or go comeunto.christ.org, and then we wrote that in each and every one of them. And so it was so successful that we ended up doing it throughout the entire Boston mission with every Barnes and Noble bookstore. And it was like this it was a great prospecting tool. But even though the stuff is free that we give away, it still costs money to make. So I'm grateful, but they didn't charge for that, because that was something that, I don't know how it works. But I'm just grateful that we're family. And whether I went to the Orem mission home or the Provo mission home to see Mr. Mission President Hendrickson and Sister Hendrickson, they're accommodating, and that's what our church is about. Is we want to serve, we want to share, we want to. I titled this if you ever need a therapist, go live. It is the best thing. I feel like you guys have all been my therapist in addition to my Leahona, a constant comforter. And as the last live of this journey, as I literally am, the wheels are down on this plane, getting ready to hit the runway. I couldn't have done it, number one, without our Savior. Number two, without the Holy Ghost telling me when to pull over, when to stop, when to keep going, and listening. But in addition to that, I owe a huge amount of gratitude for each and every one of you. For being listening to my rants or my therapy sessions or whatever, or even learning with me as I shared what I learned on the Church News podcast the last couple of hours. So, again, this has been one of the most amazing journeys. Wasn't easy, but that tells me if it was too easy, it wouldn't be true. It wouldn't be true. I know my challenges or my trials make me a better person. And it makes me realize that I can take my weaknesses and turn them into strength. I am thinking of a verse. So I was reading in the Come Follow Me curriculum this morning, and I'm trying to think of the parable that I came up with. I wrote it down, but I can't get it while I'm driving, because I'm studying a few weeks ahead of what we actually are studying. Like this week is Mosiah chapter 4, I believe, or 10, I forget, because I'm past that, because this is how I'm learning, is preparing these lesson plans for preparing my lesson plans for my YouTube channel and my Come Follow Me, which is my way of learning, being dyslexic and doing, and not, but a lot of you are supporting that, and it means a lot to me. And I'm sorry I can't read comments, but I have my phone on Do Not Disturb the whole time I drive. When I text, I pull over. If I'm searching for a new podcast, I'm pulling over. If I need to make a phone call, I'm pulling over. So I don't. Keep it up. Thank you. I'm not stopping. I am literally probably 35 minutes from the mission home or mission office in Provo. All right, everybody, have an awesome day. Thank you so much for this. I feel like a bittersweet emotion going, and I pray you learned what I pray you got something out of what I learned and what I shared earlier. I love you, and most importantly, so doesn't God. I'm gonna switch this and hang up.